Hello, bonjour. I'm Andrew Mosker, President and CEO of National Music Centre, and this is the NMC Amplifier podcast.
I feel like we're like ambassadors of the truck. I feel like we go around the country playing shows and telling everyone, listen, the truck is in Calgary. You need to go make a live record there. This record is as much about the truck and the space and sort of letting the world know that it's here and doing our job at that as it is, you know, having our album in equal parts.
Great to be here today at National Music Centre Amplifier podcast. Our guests today are Sean Hall and Matt Rogers, otherwise known as the Harpoonist and the Axe Murderer. I'm really excited that you guys have taken the time to spend a little bit of time with us today to record this podcast, because we've worked on a project together for a number of years, which has culminated in the release of this record, Live at the King Eddy by the Harpoonist and the Axe Murderer. It was several years in the making. This year it was up for Best Blues Album of the Year at the JUNOs and won the Western Canadian Music Alliance category for Best Blues Album. Congratulations for the nomination and the award. I met you guys here at the National Music Centre. You were playing on the bridge during the Calgary Folk Festival's winter festival called Block Heater. And that was a really interesting time because it was the first year that we'd ever hosted Block Heater. So all of the sort of, if I can call them, the groove bands, the bands with any groove where people would potentially be dancing, were put up on the bridge. So you were up there with a Delhi to Dublin and a couple of other bands. And this was the first time we'd ever had a major event like this in the new National Music Centre, which at that time was only a couple years old. The bridge was flexing that night.
Were you worried about the structural integrity? Did you have to call up some engineers?
I did. And you know what's interesting about that, Matt, is I actually called Simon from RJC Structural Engineering, who were the structural engineers on this building. You can see some pictures of it when it was, being built right here. This was a very complicated piece of structural engineering steel.
Yeah.
And the bridge itself was not inserted after the two buildings were built. It was built as part of the whole structure.
Right. Okay.
And so I called Simon the night of your set because there was 300 or 400 people up on the bridge and it was flexing.
Yeah.
And of course there were people that were nervous, and then there were others that didn't really care. Yeah. They were like, oh, this is great. Like the bridge is flexing. So I called Simon up and this is what he said to me. He goes, are any tiles falling off the building?
Any tiles? Like,
the ceramic tiles on the building, right? It's made of little ceramic tiles. And I looked, I said, no, I don't see any. Actually, I don't see any spots. He goes, it's fine. The integrity of the structural engineering is fine and it allows for some flex.
Right.
And so that was the night I met you guys.
I would have been a little less nervous had I known that during that show. I felt like I was like, uh-oh, are we going down?
Yeah, totally. And so after your set, you were backstage and I came up to you, introduced myself, and I said, I think it would be wonderful for the Harpoonist and the Axe Murderer to do a residency here at the National Music Centre and record an album on the Rolling Stones mobile recording studio. Just, given your sound and who your influences were, and just your overall feeling and vibe musically. My feeling about it was it would be a great project to work on because you had this connection musically to some of the historical equipment here at the National Music Centre in the studio, in particular, the Rolling Stones mobile recording studio.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this whole building is full of historic equipment, instruments, microphones, outboard gear, tape machines, consoles that we've been collecting for many, many, many years. And we finally built this building and put it into our studios. And the vision was always to invite artists to come and use and record and create with it. We kind of use it, we describe it often as using history to make history.
Yeah.
New history. So you were our first pilot
guinea
program.
pig.
Thank you. Yeah.
Guinea pig
First
slash
guinea
pilot.
pig.
Yeah.
And obviously there was a lot of stops and starts along the way because of the pandemic, but we finally nailed something down for you to do the three performances here in 2019. And then the pandemic came shortly thereafter. but here we are. You've released a record, and so I just wanted to chat with you about that whole process. And I mean, how did you feel as artists coming into work here at the National Music Center, playing in the Eddy and approaching this recording project?
I feel like it was a situation that was built for us. Like when, we heard about the Rolling Stones mobile rig being in Calgary, we didn't know it was at the NMC. We just heard through sort of like
the grapevine,
through the grapevine, maybe probably like 10 years ago.
Really? Oh wow,
maybe
that's interesting.
Maybe not quite 10 years ago, 8 years ago. We were down in Nashville.
You were in. So where did you first hear about?
Was it Nashville
mobile
or Canada?
We were having Mexican food with Steve Dawson.
Oh yeah,
Ian Menzies. Was Steve's manager, I guess.
At the time, yeah.
And he was the one that told us that it was.
And Ian would
Calgary.
know because Ian worked with us for a little period of time in our old building.
Okay.
And I've known Steve Dawson from just around.
Yeah.
And when you were first heard about it, it was still in storage.
Right.
So we acquired the Rolling Stones mobile in roughly the year 2000.
Okay.
Long time ago.
Wow.
That's when I first started working here.
Wow.
We were Cantos Music Foundation.
Cantos, yeah, I remember that.
And we had really nowhere to put it. It was a great opportunity to acquire it. And in those days, we were just building up our collection of electronic music instruments and equipment, which included recording equipment. It became available, known to us through Lenny Kravitz's team.
Oh,
that's amazing.
Henry Hirsch was producing Lenny in those days, and they loved Helios consoles.
That's right.
They had this interest in them in those days.
Yeah.
So we knew someone that was engineering a record for Lenny, and there was a consultant working for us from Calgary, from LA, who was living in Calgary, named David Keene, who was also an electronic music collector, founder of the Oddities Foundation.
Oh, wow.
And he just said to me one day, this is in the year 2000, he was working with us here in Calgary. He goes, the Rolling Stones mobile is available. We should acquire it. And I went, okay, that sounds very interesting. So we raised the money. We're a charity. And we raised the money and we brought it to Calgary and put it in storage for 15 years. So when you first heard about it from Steve and Ian, it was still in storage. And what was your initial sense of when you first heard about it? Did you start thinking about, wouldn't it be great to do a project with it? You did?
The first time that we were like outside of Nashville, I remember Matt and I chatting, watching Begonia, who was then Alexa and Andrina, and we were at the Canmore Folk Fest. Do you remember? We were like chatting at one of those after parties, and those guys were playing, and I remember sitting there over red wine, and we were watching those guys sing it out, and we were like, wait a minute, what if we could possibly gain access to this truck? And this is after we knew that Deep Dark Woods had done a record in Kananaskis country in a cabin. And we were like, what if we could maybe grab this truck that's supposedly in Calgary and we could maybe take it someplace and access it and maybe bring it into the Rockies.
Right. We thought it would be mobile.
We thought that it would maybe be mobile.
And we didn't know you had acquired it, of course. We just knew it was in Calgary.
Yeah. Wow. So this is interesting to hear this because at the time our goal was to potentially make it mobile. But then, as we got to know the vehicle, it's an old vehicle again, and it started to be more of a risk to put something like that on the road again. Plus, not so much mechanically, but equipment-wise, as you guys probably know, anything that's older and vintage, as soon as it goes over bumps and gets moved around, eventually it's going to cause serious maintenance issues. So we decided that let's just build it into the building and then start to talk to artists to try to build some relationships with some artists and work on some projects together. So when we finally decided on some dates, had you conceived the idea of what, did you just sort of go into it with a plan, or did you just go into it thinking, well, let's see how it goes? And then secondly, how did the recording of the film come into play? And what was sort of the inspiration to capture it as a film, potentially released later as a film as well?
Yeah. I mean, we went in with a plan. We were like, we're recording a live record. We gotta get this. That was, and it was part of why we did a 3-night run. And I mean, even going back one step, like the fact that you guys installed it right next to a blues bar.
Yeah.
It was just
a no-brainer.
This is the plan meant for us.
Yeah.
Because we, and it's the perfect type of blues bar too, like it's lively enough, but controlled enough at the same time. So we went in knowing, like, we'd always wanted to do a live record because our studio records are different, how we sound live. We wanted to sort of capture that energy. And it's hard to do. Like, it's really hard to capture a live album energy, but we felt like if we're going to do it anywhere and anytime, this is the place to do it.
And we also like heavily romanticize, and as a lot of people do from our generation, I'll just say we're in our 40s. How's that? That's good.
Oh, okay.
The arc and the lost love of the live record, and how it's like, how it has fallen out of fashion in modern times for whatever reason. People they're not telling the same stories through live records. And maybe it's because it's the YouTube, but maybe it's because technology allows people to like capture everything, so they don't feel like capturing the entirety of a story. And Matt and I really wanted to see if we could tell our story as a live band, and have it actually translate onto record. And it's a really, it's an incredible art. It's not super easy at all. Just because you play a great show doesn't mean your great show translates through the truck, right? You need to, you're going through the truck, or you're going through a Trident or a Helios, doesn't mean you're going to cut the mustard. And for us, it was a super challenge,
The technology can only serve so much, right? And when I listened to that record, the first cuts of it, and actually I watched the film first before I listened to the record, because you had sent me just a link to the film. And one of the things I loved about the film, like the first minute into it, not even the first 30 seconds into it, just the way, the sort of cinematography was, and just the filter on the film. Whatever filter was used on that film, Matt, you work in the film business. I'm sure you could tell me technically what that was.
I don't know anything about that side of things.
Not part of the film business. But when I watched the first 15, 30 seconds, you really felt that you captured the magic of the live performance in that film. It was the way it was edited, the way there was various, screens, images on one screen at sometimes three at a given time. And you got the singers, the background singers, Adriana and Dawn, and you guys, and the crowd as well. You could really just feel the vibe from the crowd. So that, to me, Jean, was like you captured the essence of the magic of that. You really did, I think, in that film.
That was the idea. Yeah. And I mean, hats off to Evan, our director of the film.
Yeah.
But we did have quite a few conversations about, the style that we were going for. And we were basically just like, make it look like The Last Waltz.
Yeah, make it look like The Last Waltz.
It worked with his personality too, because he's like, I don't have this big crew. And we're like, we didn't want to hyper produce a band that we had largely been, prior to 2019, we were largely undocumented in a high definition way. Matt and I, we've just been always constantly just, one foot in front of the other, and like just working on the show. And we haven't been, there's no drone that's flying in and around our shows. We can't put a drone down in the King Eddy.
Be hard to fly a drone in the King Eddy.
Yeah, be hard to fly a drone.
I'm sure somebody could do it.
That's no diss against DJ culture, all disses. But we were largely undocumented. So by the time we came and made this record, we were like, 2 cameras, that Woodstock, style filmmaking, that stereoscopic, like really tight shots, like that's all that's required, because we weren't standing then.
Yeah.
Like, how do you make a seated band really animated?
Did knowing that the Rolling Stones mobile was such an important part of the recording process, were you thinking about that at all? Like, well, you were picking your set list, and were you thinking like you were?
I think we were trying not to be honest, because it's, it's like, this is what No Woman, No Cry was. Okay, no, just don't think about that. Just play a good show. And I think we started psyching ourselves up a little bit and had to, sort of pull back a little bit on our expectations of doing everything perfectly.
Yeah.
And just try and have fun. Like, obviously we were trying to record, but we didn't want to overthink it.
It was your red DI boxes that threw me.
The one that said the ones that said
The one that say mobile, those red DI boxes. That's what, like, I went, oh, wait a minute. Family man, Aston Barrett, bass player from Bob Marley and Wailers, someone went through this DI box, and then my brain was like, oh gosh.
Yeah, that mobile's got an incredible history. I mean, when it came to us as a potential to acquire, when Lenny Kravitz's team reached out to us, and in those days the internet wasn't as far advanced as it is now, right?
Yeah.
So just getting research on its pedigree was not always easy. But what we did find out about it was amazing, and you mentioned, Bob Marley's first tour of Europe used the mobile. Led Zeppelin, I mean, lots of Rolling Stones records, and so much more than that. It's interesting about this. It was like the first professional multi-track mobile recording studio really in history.
Yeah.
Because the Stones had to use it because they were exiled from England for tax reasons, right? And then they had to keep working. So, the story, Ian Stewart, their manager at the time, said, well, you guys need to keep working, so we're just going to build a studio for you. And let's move to France. Exile on Main Street was made, legendary, sort of rock mythology, about how an album could come together.
I think they spent a lot on the budget of that record.
And it's interesting when you hear Mick Jagger talk about, Exile on Main Street is his album that people have been very influenced by, and he just discusses it often as, there's one or two good songs on it. He really kind of dismisses it.
Oh, no way.
But it had so much influence, and the mythology around its creation with the mobile has certainly kind of fueled the story about this machine, this piece of equipment and machine that we have here at NMC. I can tell you, since it's been installed here in 2016, I can tell you the amount of artists that have come through here just to see it, just to touch it, just to go inside it, see a DI box, touch the console. It's a long list of, very famous artists to just, not so famous artists, and just young aspiring artists who just want to be near it to, kind of feel some of its magic dust. And so the idea of producing a record with you on it and just hearing your feedback has been really interesting, the intimidation piece, and forget about that. But what other kinds of exciting things have inspired you around, maybe after you heard what was recorded on it? Did it sound were you expecting to sound the way it did? Were you expecting it to sound different? Were you underwhelmed? Were you overwhelmed? Or were you just not thinking about anything in terms of the audio quality of it?
I think we were pretty pleased. I think, it's like Sean was mentioning, there's things that fly in a live setting that don't really translate, being on a record. So we had to figure out how to work around that. If it's talking to someone in the audience for a minute and you can't hear them because we haven't mic'd the audience up, then it doesn't translate. So there was a lot of sort of going through and picking which performances, which is why I was so lucky to be able to do 3 nights in a row, because then you could pick the performances that translated onto a live record. And we were like, I remember being like, this has vibe. We gotta, we gotta mix it. We gotta carve it out. We gotta choose the right moments. But there's definitely a vibe. And knowing we wanted to do the video with it too meant we couldn't mess with it too much, right? Like, we had to keep it like honest, so it would,
there were things that there were here. I'll say this. I hope that my partner doesn't mind, because it was my ex-wife's name that was mentioned.
Oh yeah,
in the song called
Your ex-wife's name was mentioned during one of the performances. And we'll just spell it out for the kids at home. Oh, wait a minute.
It's on the CD version, not the vinyl version, so I'm okay.
Yeah.
So we did a tune called Sarah. Each night, I hope I don't get in trouble. And I would call out a Sarah from the crowd, and each night there was a absolutely beautiful Sarah that would come out in the crowd, and I would sing the song to her. And what we wished was on the video, the film version, was that we actually maybe had a third or fourth camera to cover it. And there were things like, and so on the record, and I went out and I think I like crawled across the floor on my hands and knees on one of the nights. I know I did.
You did.
And I crawled like right up to her and like, was begging. And I wish like something like that had been captured on film. How does that translate to record? Right? It doesn't unless you have the film component. So, and that's an amazing thing. But how does that translate on film? Beautifully if it's on film, right? So that's a really neat learning point for us because we're undocumented before then.
We're Matt, you said 3 nights it was great to be able to be in a residency for 3 nights. Do you think it would have made a difference if it was 1 night or 4 nights? What would you recommend to other artists?
I mean, I think 3 nights is the magic number. Yeah, you do a Friday. What did we do? We did a Friday, a Saturday, and then a Sunday matinee. And it was actually a lot of the stuff from the Sunday matinee that we ended up choosing, which is interesting because you watch the video and it feels like it's at night.
It does. It totally feels like that.
And the music sounds like it's at night, and I think we thought it was night in our heads.
we 100% did. Well, because you're doing this Groundhog Day thing, but you can't get to a Sunday any other way. There's no ups, there's no way around a Sunday. You need to go straight through the Friday and Saturday. You can't show up and pretend that you've done all the work and all the hustle and bustle. Like Sunday is a match. I mean, that's why it's always been the Lord's Day. That's why it's the best day at music festivals and folk festivals.
Yeah.
Right? There's
just a different sort of, it captured a different looseness on a Sunday. You're still feeling the night before a little bit, and that translates in a good way, I think.
Yeah.
You're sort of you've got a little bit more, I don't know, gravel.
You have more gravel. Your guard is down. Your crowd's guard is down. The egos are being a little bit suppressed. You've slashed your T's and dotted your I's on Friday. Saturday. I remember we had this lady kicked out on Saturday because she was becoming the show, right? So like, careful what you ask for. And you remember those bros in your corner on Saturday night? You had these bros that like their energy was so much so that I was like, oh, wait a minute, the crowd is going to overtake the band on the record. And if you listen to the Stones' Love You Live at El Macombo, it wasn't done on the mobile, but the crowd is I'd say the band is maybe 2/3 and the crowd is a heavy third, and it kind of goes up to half and half at a lot of points. The banter and the band calling each other, bisexual and homosexual, and like the banter that's going back and forth, and you
I don't remember any of that.
Like, well, I mean, I grew up I was fascinated with that record because I grew up in Toronto and
on the Stones record.
The Stones record. No, sorry, the El Macombo record, and I was very much thinking about that the whole time that we were doing the shows. I'm like, you want the crowd. You can't contrive a performance out of a crowd.
There was, speaking of, you had brought up No Woman No Cry and the DI boxes from the Rolling Stones mobile. Like, if you got a chance to just do some homework on the mobile and just to learn about the music that has gone through the signal path, on that console, it's pretty remarkable. And it's not all documented, even in the studio space where those albums are. But we've got a really great file on it here at NMC. What albums, you mentioned Bob Marley, were there any other, albums that were recorded on the mobile that were part of your, like,
I'm not gonna name an album,
or
but
a song?
Just the opening, the drums for When the Livy Breaks
Yeah,
is just
iconic
like
one.
That's iconic. It's been sampled a million times, and the whole story of how they someone was bringing John Bonham a new drum set, and they set it up in the stairwell just for him to try it, And so it's just like, oh yeah, what do we think of these drums? And they're like, we're recording these there. And the fact that it was the truck that recorded that drum sound, which in my mind is like one of the most iconic drum sounds ever, that, you know, I've listened to that hundreds, if not thousands of times, and people have tried to recreate it and have been able to, and all that type of stuff. That's a huge one.
Really deep purple.
I mean, the fact that there's a song with the truck in it is
Smoke on the Water.
yeah, and a very famous song.
Yeah, very, very famous song. Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy the show, please take a moment to give us the highest rating you can on your podcast app. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. National Music Center is a registered charity with a mission to amplify the love, sharing, and understanding of music, and we rely on donor support to achieve this mission. If you like this show or anything else that National Music Center is doing, please consider leaving a donation by following the link in the description. One of the engineers that worked on the truck for years and years with the Stones, Mick McKenna, he's still alive. And we brought him out last summer. Now I had reached out to him because I had been connected through somebody else who is a keyboard player that sort of tours in a blues review band in England. So he wanted to come out to Calgary to play because he was going to be in the area. And then he connected me with Mick McKenna. We had already been in touch years past, but followed up with Mick. It'd be great for you to eventually come to Calgary to share everything that you remember about working with the Stones and the Mobile. And he actually wrote me right back. Our team had been in touch with him over the years anyway, so we'd kind of lost contact for a few years. So when I eventually got on a Zoom call with him, he said, I was the last person to close up the Mobile before the Stones sold it at Bonham's auction house. So it was sold at Bonham's auction house in the 90s. And then it came to the US. Someone in the US bought it. And then we ended up raising the money to buy it from this person. So this was like in the year early 2000. So interestingly enough, when I had got connected with Mick and he came here for a few days, one thing that he said to me was about the Frank Zappa records specifically, and he only asked me to do one thing with the Mobile after he left. And it's partly given what Sean and I are wearing today, but I wanted to bring it up. Like, he goes, the Stones Mobile used to be painted camouflage.
What?
It was. Originally, it was camouflage.
Oh, dude, you got a mission.
Wow.
You got a mission.
So, part of wanting to interview artists, obviously to record on the Mobile and talk about your experience, is also to share some of the history of the Mobile, right? So he sends me a note. He goes, I've told Jason, talking on our team, who, him and Eric, works on your record as well. And I told him everything I know, but I'm only going to tell you one thing, and that is you have to make this thing camouflage again.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing? Amazing. So I wore a camouflage shirt because I know Sean was wearing one last night, and I'm like, I'm going to wear just in tribute, in honor of the Frank Zappa records.
I've got the pants.
That were done in the Mothers of Invention. But everyone has a different story about the Eddy not the Eddy, but the Mobile beside the Eddy, and what inspires them about it. Is there any music, Sean, specifically for you, historically, that was done on the Mobile that sticks out for you?
Dire Straits live record was done on the Mobile. That's like, even after I came here like 2 or 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And then like looking down the long list of records done on the Mobile, I'm like, Dire Straits live. That was, wait a minute. That was a great part of like my mid 90s listening as a teenager. I'm like, that's pretty darn neat. Fleetwood Mac, I had no clue that they recorded on a Mobile. 10cc, who next to Jimi Hendrix, I thought was probably one of the best. Oh, sorry, not 10cc. 10 years after. 10 years after was one of the best artists, I think, from Woodstock, next to Joe Cocker and Jimi Hendrix. I had no clue that they did anything. Like, there's like, who else sticks out to you?
I mean, Bob Marley is
Bob Marley's like, that's hard
that's
to,
the huge
I'm
one.
trying to push that aside in my brain. I'm like,
Yeah, I know. And Led Zeppelin 3.
yeah.
There's got to be more, but
Those two stick out. There's a few like with pedigree. It's always there's myth, there's fact, and then there's mythology, right?
Yeah.
Always, and there's lots of it with the Stones Mobile. So like with Led Zeppelin in particular, rumor has it that the demo to Stairway to Heaven was cut at Headley Grange on the Mobile.
Okay.
Yeah. Just the first demo of it. They were working it through. They're both still alive. Robert Plant and Jimmy Page are still alive. So someday we'll find out if that's true or not. There's a few other facts that one that stood out for me when we were doing a lot of research on it was the Mobile traveled all over Europe. I mean, it went as far as Russia.
Wow.
Because the Stones, it was a business for the Rolling Stones.
Right.
Not only did they use it for themselves because they had to, because they were exiled from their own country, but they decided that, there was obviously a lot of other artists who would like to use this. So in those days, it became a business for them. And that's why so many other records were made on it other than their own. So television shows with Miles Davis on them, Moscow Philharmonic, all the way into Russia. And I even heard this one rumor, which I would love to confirm just because of my in-laws, but Nana Mouskouri,
Oh, wow.
she was exiled from Greece. You may know this about Nana Mouskouri. Made most of her life in Europe, in France, most of her life, but her return to the Acropolis in Greece when she was welcomed back into the country, she did a live show at the Acropolis in Greece, and the Stones Mobile recorded that concert. Yeah, so it's got an interesting story, associated with it.
And not just rock bands.
Not just rock bands. No, not just rock bands. And I just think it's just so exciting that it's here in Canada, here at the NMC for Canadian artists like yourselves who can start to work some new magic with it, you know? And so I always like to just share that bit of context because it's a long context from when we acquired it many, many years ago and just squirreled it away, learned a lot about it. And then our late technician, John Linesider, basically got it up and running again so it could be used after we had acquired it from the previous owner in the US. And now artists like yourselves have been able to really, have their way with it in a way and experiment with it.
Oh, I would say it had its way with us. That's good. We did not have our way with that. Right, Matt? Like it has its way. And if when we were doing the record, everything was, thank goodness for Jason Talk and Eric Cinnamon for, the engineering on it. But if there was a channel that would cut out because, just the nature of that truck and the spirits on board, then that would dictate if we would use or not use that one song. So if and there were some tunes that
Sounds like he's got most of that.
He's got
under
most
control.
of it. He's got most of it under control now. But when we definitely worked out a few ghosts.
Yeah. I mean, part of the beauty of working here is not just the truck and not just the King Eddy, but it's the spirit of the whole place, the people that you get to collaborate with. It's a very supportive environment, and that goes a long way. The fact that, we came here and I forget, maybe a day or two early, and we workshop stuff in the studio and did a bunch of vocal rehearsals in the studio and, had a nice studio with a nice piano at our disposal. And then, of course, coming back to mix it here. So it was, it's a one-stop shop for not only cutting the record, but for preparing it and for doing all the stuff afterwards as well.
And for
it's a good coffee shop.
So it's a great coffee shop, but being able to, I still have an unpaid bar tab from I think come on, let's say it was a sandwich tab from you know where to find me, but being able to come back here and mix on the Trident and then proceed to pull out all of the available outboard gear, including Neil Young's Ampeg bass amp to reamp, Matt's bass, and then have that run for 5 days straight 12 hours a day cranking that space, and you can smell the amp cooking. I'm like, this is how records, like, this is truly the inclusiveness that you want to feel when making a record. And a lot of people don't feel that nowadays because we feel that we have all the technology that we need with one microphone, a USB, and a laptop, and we're done. But that's not the case. All we need is a basement, but that's not the case at all. It felt like I felt the luckiest I had ever felt when we did our record, when we came back and mixed here. I was like,
well, we really appreciate that feedback. I mean, we're very proud of our team here, Jason and Eric and Graham Lassard, our studio manager, worked with lots of artists in this country. And, the vision for this National Music Center was always to be what you've just described. It's taken us, and it continues to be a journey, but it's taken us years to get there, and collecting all of this equipment over the years was always in our minds. Yes, some of this is historic and belongs behind glass because it is historic nature is so unique. But a lot of the equipment we acquired, the microphones, the outboard gear, the Stones Mobile, and the harpsichords, the pianos, all of those other pieces of all those other pieces of equipment and instruments, our intent was always to let creators come in and experiment with them, and in all genres of music. So, I think it was just very fitting that the King Eddy, being traditionally known as a blues bar, as you mentioned, Calgary's home of the blues for many, many years. And then the NMC acquires it, builds the NMC around, installs the mobile next to it. And then our first record collaboration with you happens to be a blues record. It was just
could have been a folk record.
You could have been a folk record.
Johnny
it was
Mitchell
just
cover album.
Really good way to kick off this tradition that we want to start here.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to? What have you said? Would you recommend to other artists to come and record here using the mobile and the other equipment here?
I feel like we're like ambassadors of the truck. I feel like we go around the country playing shows and telling everyone, listen, the truck is in Calgary. You need to go make a live record there. And, cause I mean, I think Sean and I feel the same. Like, this record is as much about the truck and the space and sort of, letting the world know that it's here and doing our job at that as it is, having our album. It's sort of equal parts to us. So I mean, to answer your question, we tell everyone that we know, especially people that, bands that are good live.
Well, it's really unified. Matt and I have agreed and disagreed on lots as bands do over the years. And we have really, really come back again and again and again over like how lucky we are to have met you. You found us, we found you. And being able to like be the first band to make a live record on this truck that has been here for almost a quarter of a century now. That's a long time, Edges. And we feel like, I feel like this is the beginning of like us just as like, ambassadors for who wants to like take a kick at the can. And kids, do you want to get out and try something that is really, really incredible and like not just challenging, but do you want to experience a different relationship with your band and it doesn't mean that everyone needs to go out and make a live record, but I truly think that the live record, that art form, could definitely make a comeback. Whether it's us that opened it up for Canada, who knows? I have no clue. But I definitely want to keep championing the experience and I don't know. I can't.
You must have
so
some
proud.
ideas for us, as creators, as artists, recording artists, touring artists, soundtrack creators. Any ideas, advice on how we could continue this tradition that we started with you with the mobile in terms of projects?
A list after. No, I mean, I think you guys are doing a great job, first of all.
Oh, you mean should we like get out on the road and like start to go around and talk to people and maybe
Yeah, well, we've talked about a few ideas, you know, maybe creating a little series with it, you know, doing the one a quarter, one a month, and or one every 6 months, and kind of idea, and you know, a curated series. Like we've done a second one with Corblund recently, as I mentioned to you, which hasn't come out yet, and there's nothing else after that yet. We're just still in the we're exploring opportunities. Let's put it that way.
I think that, I mean, the passion is contagious, right? So you started it here, and you got this truck here, and then we caught the bug. Corb caught the bug. Many, many, many more people will catch the bug. Gordy Johnson, who played with us last night, caught the bug, and the first person he freaking texted was Chris Robinson, and he goes, "The Black Crowes need to come here and make a record."
Very cool.
So
thank you for that.
So
That's
good. Andrew Mosker, Matt Rogers, Sean Hall, Gordy Johnson, Chris Robinson. Then let's see where it goes from there. But if the Black Crowes come in here and do a 5-night run,
Yeah,
that'd be okay.
what a perfect band to do it too.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think expanding beyond thinking of it as just a live recording,
Yeah.
you know, like it's a great console, and the King Eddy's a nice sounding room too, you know, and you don't have to do it at night with people drinking. Don't have to have an audience there. You could, you know, something more similar to this, like sitting around and talking about the truck, and then going up and performing 3 songs just to track them, and maybe doing a few takes without an audience there, or with, or whatever, you know, like I think there's just, the world is your oyster with it. And the fact that you guys have it, you know, wired in, connected to like all these other rooms, like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but can you record Tontos as a truck?
You could. Yeah, you could. Yeah, the studio was designed that way, so all the live rooms are integrated. So yes, it can be done. It can be done, you know, which is, you know, part of I think we've been very fortunate to have time on our side, you know, acquiring all of these items over many years, and then getting the green light to build this building in 2006, and then opening 10 years later in 2016. So we hired Martin Pilchner from Toronto to design our studios when we were building the building. He was the subcontractor on studios. And we had the time to talk about integrating all this gear into creating a one-of-a-kind, you know, experience for artists and creators anywhere in the world that rivals anywhere in the world, that's unique, you know, because of the equipment. And at the same time helps this country's artists continue to create using this gear somehow, you know. And it's different for every artist, as you know. Like some artists are nervous around historic equipment. They're like, I'm not sure if this is really my thing, you know?
Yeah.
Others are like, they want to embrace it, like yourself, you know, and there's, you know, some that are kind of in between. I mean, Sam Roberts said to me when he came here with his band, not to record, but they were on tour and they just came for a tour. And I showed them, they only had their picture taken in front of one thing, and it was the RSM, the Stones Mobile.
Yeah.
They looked at everything, but they wanted their picture in front of the Stones Mobile, right?
What's a piece of history?
Yeah. And you know, guitar, bass, rock band, Sam Roberts band, and they're obviously a big influence on them. And he said, wow, I mean, there are so many things you can do here that you just have to decide, I'm going to just do this, and not focus on all the other options that are
right.
here.
Like
you know,
keep the messaging focused.
Keep the messaging focus is what he shared me. And, you know, he did say to me, we would love to come and do something here too, you know, something live in the Eddy off the floor, similar to what, you know, you had done.
Killer.
You know, and so
I mean, we've seen him play small bars at South by Southwest
Yes.
because it's, you know, that's the vibe of South by Southwest.
Yeah.
You play stadiums in Canada, but small bars at South by Southwest, and they rock the small, you know, not that the King Eddy's that small, but, you know, like it's small for the Sam Roberts band, but they would.
But it is like you built, I'm not gonna call you Willy Wonka, but this is kind of Willy Wonka's music factory. And maybe you are musical Willy Wonka, with your camouflage. But
Just use your imagination.
Yeah.
I don't know. And maybe the tiles on the side of the Bell Center are made of chocolate. I was telling
Maybe
Lindsay
they
that
are.
last night. I was like, "Have you licked the tiles?" She's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "They're chocolate."
There's chocolate. Sean, you're hilarious. Hilarious. Well, look, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with the National Music Center to record the first real full-length live record, using the Stones mobile.
Our privilege.
And doing the residency here, and then coming back and playing last night, and producing a film of the whole experience, which we're screening tonight in the National Music Center Theater across the street at Studio Bell. And excited to watch that film again with you and have another Q&A with the public.
Yeah.
And talk a bit more about some of the things that we talked about today. And I just wish you all the best, and this is a culmination of many albums that you've produced. And we're very proud to be part of your musical journey here at NMC. I think what you do, musically speaking, is incredibly unique and real. I would describe it myself as being a music person, as what you do is very authentic, and that's not easy to do. It's not easy to be authentic in music. It's challenging, but you guys can do that. Your fans love you. You have an amazing connection with your audiences, and you can feel it just in the room, and so anytime National Music Center can connect with artists like you, it's just a real privilege. So thank you for being part of this journey here and taking some time to be on the Amplifier podcast today with us.
Thanks, Andrew.
A pleasure. Any parting words, Sean or Matt, before we wrap today?
Oh, get off your laptop, get out of your seat, Toronto, and come across the country and come share your story through the circuitry here and recognize what the heck is going on in Southern Alberta. It's like you are very fortunate here, and we're very fortunate to be,
Well said.
Well said. Well, I wish you all the best on your future journey and projects, because I know both of you have lots of really interesting things planned, and we look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Take care. Thank you for listening to the National Music Center's podcast, NMC Amplifier, with me, Andrew Mosker. We have lots of other great content online for free, including live performances, videos, articles, podcasts, interviews with artists, and more. Head over to amplify.nmc.ca and check it out. National Music Center is a registered charity with a mission to amplify love, sharing, and understanding of music, and we rely on donor support to achieve this mission. If you like the show or anything else NMC is doing, please consider leaving us a donation. NMC Amplifier is recorded on Treaty 7 in Mohkinstsis, Calgary, Alberta, Canada, at Studio Bell, home of the National Music Center. To learn more about National Music Center, go to studiobell.ca. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, au revoir.